remarks and questions at the end of my talk. I was very moved also by your singing of the national anthem. I believe, and we believe at the IMF, that Pakistan is a great country with lots of potential, potential for growth, potential for social development, and there can be little doubt that the future is in your hands. The IMF is presently occupying much media airtime and very present in public debates, specifically regarding the economy and our program engagement with the government. But today I would like us to focus on the broader economic conditions in the Middle East and Central Asia region to help you put Pakistan into a broader regional perspective. Now, this region is vast. Am I handling the passing of the slides? So I will be telling you when you have to move to the next one. Yeah, very well. Thanks for your assistance. Now, the region is vast. It comprises of 32 countries, which are highly heterogeneous in their level of development. There is the oil exporters, there is the emerging market and middle economies, there is the low-income countries. And turns out that from some cluster analysis conducted by IMF staff, Pakistan comes close to the so-called Middle East and North Africa region. We are talking about countries such as Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Morocco, Tunisia, West Bank and Gaza. Those are the countries that share commonalities in terms of real, fiscal, structural dimensions, external dimensions, and this is why the presentation today is going to focus on the Middle East, North Africa, and Pakistan. First, commodity prices. Left chart. Commodity prices remain high. Food prices have returned to the pre-war levels, but remain well above the 2021 levels. High food, high fertilizer prices are posing food security challenges in the region, particularly to the most vulnerable segments of the population. Oil prices have been volatile. Today we forecast for this year 2022 at about $98 a barrel. That's over 40% higher than in 2021. Second, middle chart, global financial conditions. They have tightened faster and more sharply than we had anticipated back in April. Why? Monetary policy across the globe is tightening at a faster pace than envisioned in response to outside surprises to inflation. Region food inflation remains the main driver. However, there is evidence that inflation is becoming more widespread across products in the CPI basket. In addition, right chart, financial conditions in the emerging markets in the region have tightened more than in the average emerging economy worldwide. Sovereign bond spreads we've seen that have widened substantially in several countries in the region, Egypt, Tunisia, Pakistan, as we are seeing, reflecting investor concern dynamics as they would translate into higher government debt service costs. Next, disinflationary pressures could be more costly than expected and trigger a severe slowdown in global activity that would worsen the external conditions for the region via trade. And finally, a persistent slowdown in China could affect those countries that have close trade links with China directly and the global economy through indirect spillovers. Next slide, please. Now, what is the role of policies in tackling the economic challenges in the near term and strengthening resilience and strengthening inclusion over the medium term? Next slide. So here's a double entry table with two dimensions. country types and policies. And let me focus on the emerging market and middle economies. Those are, is the column in the middle. That's where Pakistan belongs. And let me share with you a few initiatives that we are going to be pursuing over the coming months, and tell you about the summer internship program that we have at the plant, in particular addressed to PhD students. On the latter, we invite for 3 to 4 months to Washington, come to headquarters, PhD students from across the world, about 100 students, and precisely these days, the period for applications just opened, so I would be happy to share the ad, and you can see the rate. You've already got it, excellent. And it is an opportunity for students from across the world to come to headquarters, bring fresh ideas, and support research projects that we are undertaking. Secondly, I very much like your remark about engaging with the different departments across the university, and the reason is that in our agenda we care about areas which sometimes go unnoticed, because of course our core mandate is to help governments with attaining macro-stabilization, but we are also undertaking efforts to bring forward agendas in the areas of gender, in the area of climate change, and some other social dimensions. And in this context, I didn't share it with the faculty members because it was little time with you, but we would like to feature a seminar around February, March, precisely on inclusive growth and labor markets post-COVID and the gender agenda, and the role of the private sector in unleashing the growth potential, the SOEs agenda, and so on and so forth. So this is something that we can explore, and students from across departments could also join, given the social dimension as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. First is that, do you think that IMF is persistently financing our balance of payment or structural fiscal deficit since early 90s or late 80s, but still Pakistan is struggling in structural problem. New liberal policies of IMF and other international financial institutions, do you think that they are failed in subcontinent, especially in Pakistan? Because investment or pro-poor policies are not being monitored by these agencies. They are just financing our fiscal needs or financial needs, but the character of State Bank, do you think that they are unable to finance or need of credit easing in general masses?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Being engaged with the government for many years, and here I would like to make 2 points. On the macro stabilization front, what is very important is the consistency of policies throughout time, yes. And to stay course with the policies that have been agreed and discussed with the government. And when there are policy reversals, well, to reverse the reversals and to keep things on track, and this is what we are striving for now in the context of the current 9th review. Secondly, I found your point very appropriate. Despite all these engagements and past programs, there is still lots of room for economic transformation in Pakistan to alleviate the BOP growth constraint that the country is facing. There are several indicators that point to the urgent need to proceed with this agenda. I would mention 2: exports to GDP and investment to GDP shares have been declining over time. Not that they have remained stable, but have been declining over time. And this is a concern because the trends are very discernible and very apparent. So there is indeed a need for a very thorough debate on structural transformation. There are some areas that the program has pursued and usually are associated with the management of macro policies, but which also have structural repercussions over time. One is management of prices. Yeah, we want prices in Pakistan that are primarily market-based rather than administrative managed, starting with the exchange rate. The exchange rate is a very important price in the economy, and the import dependence in Pakistan is not unrelated to keeping the exchange rate artificially strong in the past. Then, in the context of the program, we are also pushing through the agenda on the state-owned enterprises, and there is now a bill that is going to be taken up to the joint session, National Assembly and Senate for approval. That bill is seen as an important step for some countries in the region that are seeking to take up investments, productive investments in Pakistan, and then there is a debate about trade policy as well, and to remove the bias embedded in trade policy towards imports, and also to think about economic integration more broadly with the region. Thank you very much.
And I'm doing PhD also. I want to ask you that do you think that IMF conditions for increase in energy prices for financing Pakistan can help Pakistan in any way? If yes, then how? Because I'm a student, and in my understanding that this is the major cause of inflation. As we can see that in last 6 to 8 months or 9 months, due to the IMF condition, our raise in the petrol prices for the consumers is approximately 75 to 80.
Yeah, I think your question is already there, so thank you very much.
The energy sector, yes. The circular debt stock as a share of GDP exceeds 3% of GDP. The flow over the past few months has been increasing. We saw the flow increasing to the tune of 500 to 600 billion between February and June, July. And as we engage in the context of the review with the Pakistani authorities these days, we are also monitoring and seeing further increases in the CD flow. That is an issue because the ability to fiscalize the CD is very limited because of lack of fiscal space. So in that, within that space, there are several areas, levers that Pakistan can use to contain and try to reduce the CD as a share of GDP to, as I said, keep the energy sector viable. One is you implicitly alluded to, it is to bring tariffs aligned with cost. If we have tariffs decoupled from cost, then the CD will continue increasing. Yes, at the same time, as we do that, we also want to protect the most vulnerable, and there is a subsidy energy reform that is attaining this goal, having more targeted subsidies to the most vulnerable. Tariff to cost alignment is not the only area that the authorities are pursuing. Another one is to enhance the efficiency in the distribution sector, like with smart metering and also the possibility of the privatization of the discourse. Then there is also how they handle the IPP payments, yeah, which are very considerable. And if you look at if you break down the drivers, or if you break down the CD, the increase in CD flow into its main drivers, you will find, and that is published in our report, that a large chunk of that is coming from the very significant IPP payments. So one thing that we have been discussing with the authorities is to proceed with the clearance of those payments and tie that to the renegotiation of those contracts, not particularly pushing for this or that country, but really clearing. There is limited fiscal space to clear arrears, but clearing arrears while at the same time renegotiating better terms for those contracts. And if the subsidy reform is not sufficient to protect the most vulnerable, we are also supplementing that with an enhanced allocation for the BISP. For the BISP, we have one target in the program That comes from our lessons learned from the Asian financial crisis in the late 90s. We learned that the fund had done a good job in stabilizing those economies, but not such a good job in protecting the most vulnerable from the adjustment policies that were required to stabilize. Since then, all of our programs care about social objectives. And for Pakistan in particular, we have a target for the BISP allocation. For fiscal year 23, it has been budgeted a 40% increase relative to the execution of BISP in 2022. And as we engage with the authorities in the context of the 9th review, we are still revisiting whether that allocation is sufficient given the challenges posed by the floods. Thank you so much.
So my question is, it has a two-part. Tell me about the key features of that you have talked about staff labor policies regarding to Pakistan, as you have implemented on the other countries, LDCs especially. And the second part is that why the obligations have been imposed, the LDCs like Pakistan are too hard in terms of returns, that ultimately impose the inflations and the hike of the prices, and the people like Pakistan have, the harder to live in this such a situation. So do you have a plan to some, substantial and some easeful policies in terms of return? This is my two parts.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We also published what the staff level agreement comprises, involves, and I would encourage you to visit our official website. I can also channel through the faculty members here. And secondly, on the obligations, look, let me first explain how we perceive our role. Yes, and we don't see ourselves as imposing on the authorities. We are here to undertake a mandate trusted by the international communities. A fund, countries have quotas, and our main role is, with Pakistan these days, is to keep the country sustainable. Yeah? We have two distinct roles. One is we provide advice. We diagnose the economic situation. We appraise the scale of the fiscal external imbalances, and then we engage with the authorities in a discussion on what could be the policies that, as revealed by the international experience, would have most chances to correct those imbalances and restore macroeconomic stability. So we are in an advisory capacity. At the end of the day, it's the government that decides to go ahead with those policies and signs up to those policies in the letter of intent and the memorandum of economic and financial policies. That goes to the ownership. Secondly, we facilitate by providing the financing, right? The adjustment has to be financed. And this is critical these days. The financing is operating as a very, very significant constraint, meaning there are payments that are coming due, and the question is whether Pakistan wants to be current over payments, and the answer that we are getting from the authorities is that they want to adhere to debt sustainability. Yes. Within that, then, well, we need to keep the borrowing needs very limited, because realistically the access to finance is very limited, as you can read, from the market's appetite to lend to Pakistan. The financing from the IFIs is very limited as well. Why? Because Pakistan is at the maximum of access to those institutions. The access to the donors we'll see in the context of the donors conference upcoming in January. We are working in Islamabad to impress upon the key stakeholders to help Pakistan as a matter of solidarity because of the very sad and devastating floods. We'll see how much financing comes from there. And as I said, how much fiscal deficit and which policy measures will have to take into consideration that financing envelope. So the policies need to be such that things add up given the financing that is available for the coming months, and also policies where we can be persuaded that, we mean the fund and the authorities persuaded that are fit for purpose in terms of the design of the package was such that let us extend generalized energy subsidies on power and oil, on power and petrol, diesel, to the whole population. Yes? At a time where international prices global prices were very high, were at the highest in the case. By so doing, well, you are preventing consumers from adjusting their consumption patterns for energy. And as you do that, coupled with the very high international prices, your imports bill is going to balloon. And that as that happens, you have the greater exchange rate pressures, and then you have greater exchange rate pressures. And as you do that, then it passes through to inflation. So the very goal that was pursued, it was not attained. The package was self-defeating. Number one, the design was not proper. And number two, Pakistan would not afford that package because it translated into over 1 percentage point of GDP hole in the fiscal accounts, and that had to be reversed. And we had agreed with the authorities at the time of the previous finance minister on a path to reverse that. A path that is consistent with the means that Pakistan has in terms of the financing. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I am very thankful to the IMF representative to deliver a talk on the economic realities, particularly in the context of Middle East and Central Asia, and particularly in the context of Pakistan. I am not expert in the field of economics, the way you people are, but I live in Pakistan, and there is always a debate about the role of IMF in terms of shaping the economic policies of Pakistan. I think people in Pakistan are basically going through a syndrome that is called big and bad. Do we tend to see those nations at the back, the Americans or the IMF, with the syndrome that they are bad? But being an academician and a researcher, we're supposed to know the true picture of our economy, the hard realities, and we have to live with other nations. As Mrs. Perez talked about the advisory role of IMF in shaping the economy of Pakistan, I personally believe that other than IMF, we have to put our house in order. Generally, we don't put our house in order and expect other external factors putting our house in order. In Pakistan, there are two things. One, it's about economic growth and thinking about the welfare of the people. So, in order to take the welfare of the people and economic growth, we don't need political slogans. Our policies are shaped by political compulsions rather than hard economic realities. So if we have our policy shaped on the basis of hard realities, then we can see improvement in our economic growth and economic prosperity. Yes, there are various external factors which directly affect Pakistan, as mentioned by the speaker, talking about the global slowdown, talking about the Chinese slowdown, but at the same time, the Ukraine war has effect globally. When one of the audience talked about the energy crisis, the whole Europe is suffering from the Ukraine war, and it is affecting us as well. So we have to see the economic realities in the term of external factors as well. Unfortunately, globally we were affected by the COVID-19, and then we talk about the Ukraine war. So, the role of IMF is very critical, and I think once for all we have to end the debate in Pakistan that whether we need IMF or not. Every 5-10 years we have IMF, right? So the nations are not going to progress without consistency in your policy, whether it's about economic policy or any policy. You need consistency in your policies. And the consistency is not possible without economic experts, the think tanks, the researchers, not the politicians. I think the politicians have failed in Pakistan miserably. Responsibility, rather than blaming the Americans, rather than blaming the IMF, or rather than blaming any economic institution. So if we have adopted or accepted the IMF conditionalities, you have to take policies according to those framework. When I was not earning money, I was taking from my father. I was accepting all his conditions. 11 बजे से पहले घर के अंदर रहना. Before 11 you have to be at home. Once I started earning money, my father was sleeping and I was dictating terms. So this is what the world is all about. So I'm very thankful to the IMF representative talking about the ground realities in Pakistan. I hope we will have a further exchange with the expert to talk about the economic realities of Pakistan so that our researchers, our faculty members are going to be benefited. And that I am thankful to the Department of Economics and the Applied Economics Research Center for organizing this event. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.